me a call and said, have you seen these terrible pictures? Should we try to do something about it? And I said, look, okay, let's see if we can save the bank. And for the next 6 months, we had pretty well everybody at Virgin working extremely hard to save the bank. And I think we had a proposition, which would have saved the bank and which would have saved most of the jobs. And we think it would have been the right thing for the government to have done. The returns we would have made were very small compared to the kinds of returns we normally make when we invest our monies. But I think that maybe a little bit of old Labour seeped in at the last minute. Just the idea that any returns could be made by private companies, that just panicked them, and they decided to nationalise it. And hopefully it won't be a trend for the future. I don't think it will be.
I'll let that one just float there for people to reflect upon. Do you remain an optimist? I've always had this impression of you of being an eternal optimist, a can-do person, even going right back to the 70s when you were doing the record business and you were challenged in court over various things and price protection rules that pertained then, and even as a late teen, early 20s guy, you took it on and fought the good fight. But we've also talked, if I may say so, quite passionately about poverty, about conflict, about the kind of issues that you and Nelson and Al and Eunice are seeking to deal with. So do you remain an optimist, or do you remain a cautious optimist?
No, I'm an optimist, an optimistic a person as I know, I think. But sometimes you have to go and make your own optimism, so. If I want to achieve something, I mean, let's say, I watched people land on the moon many years ago, and I wanted to go to the moon myself one day, and I soon realized that NASA, which is a government-run company, didn't want to take you or me to the moon, so. I didn't want to wait until my children, my grandchildren had a chance to go to the moon. I decided I better do something about it. So in order to make your own optimism, I headed off and met scientists from all over the world who had wonderful, weird contraptions to fly spaceships to and from the moon. And I finally came across a wonderful man called Bert Rutan.
Yeah.
And working with him, he created, Spaceship One, and it was wonderful to see the Virgin brand, up in space, and we're now developing Spaceship Two, which will be ready in about 18 months' time, and we'll be ready to. I'm looking forward to going. My parents are taking all their vitamin pills. They want to come with us, and so do my children. So I think so hopefully from look at a situation that looked like it wasn't going to be possible, you have to go and make your own optimism to an extent. And with global warming, people said it would be impossible for a plane to fly on clean fuels, because they said that clean fuels freeze at 15,000 feet, and the plane will crash. So, instead of just saying, okay, well, we accept that, let's try to prove them wrong. And we've had, an exciting 2 years trying to find out, what clean fuel and what you need to mix into the clean fuel to make sure that our 747 will fly at 35,000 feet. And actually, it was quite a historic day 3 days ago to prove that a clean fuel could power a 747 at 35,000 feet. And there were the skeptics out there, but unless you have to do it in stages. First of all, you need to prove it can happen, and then you need to work out how you can manufacture enough clean fuel to look after all our planes and planes throughout the world, and that's the next stage which we're working on.
And that from a Saudi audience that has many other oil-producing countries as well. I want to to finish, again, just reminding you of our theme, as it were, value creation through alliances and partnerships. You referred there to your parents, with whom you have a tremendously close partnership and have been amazingly supportive of you, and family, including children, of whom you are enormously supportive and enormously proud, and quite rightly so. It will sound a slightly glib question, but it genuinely comes from all of the hearts in this room, as it were. The future is with the young people, the men and the women of youth. You have a son and a daughter. What is your message to the youth, male and female? Because you ain't going to be doing it forever, nor am I. They will take over, and Prince Turki's grandson will eventually take over as well. Leave us with a message and a thought for those young men and women who will inherit the earth.
Well, I mean, we've enjoyed the most beautiful world ever, and I think hopefully we'll leave the world. I mean, what we should do is make sure we try to leave the world in a better world than we found it, and that's going to be a tall order. We've got a lot of hard work to do the next 20 or 30 years of our lives to make sure of that. But I think that as long as our children are positive and as long as they are determined, as we are, to try to make sure that this world is sustained, and as long as they're good at thinking about other people, then I think they hopefully will have as wonderful a lives as we've had. My son is just heading out into the Arctic for a 3-month trip to try to do some research into global warming and what's happening to the Arctic. And sadly, from everything I've read, it seems that the Arctic, the floating ice in the Arctic, we may only have about 8 or 9 years left. So I think that particular battle, I think, is a lost battle, and we're going to have to maybe accept that and move on to the bigger battles, which is making sure that mankind itself survives in the next century.
It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. Ladies and gentlemen, Sir Richard Branson.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, bye. Take care. Good to see you. Before I invite the chairman of the forum to come on and make some closing remarks, I'd like you to find your little voting panels, bearing in mind what Richard just said. We should have a slide available that asks the question, who is best suited, in your view, reflecting on all of the arguments you've heard these last 3 days, to bring positive change to our communities? Is it senior government officials? Is it corporations? Is it families? Or perhaps the final one, slightly negative, can anyone lead that change? So there we are, there's the slide. Who do you think can bring the most positive energy to that challenge that you've all identified and our speakers have helped us identify? When the little green light comes on, press 1 if you believe it is senior government officials, 2 if you believe it's corporations, that's the private sector.